So Beau Martonik, East Meets West podcast. This dude's got some awesome stories under his belt, and I really want to sit here. And I actually, like, I've been holding it back. We've been talking for 30 minutes. I want to ask you about your caribou hunt really bad, and I want to hear all the details. But this is the Whitetail podcast, so let's start with the first hour or so on whitetails, and obviously we're talking about the pre-rut and the rut today. So we probably spend 2 hours on that, but we'll catch the caribou hunt at the end. How about before we
Sounds
get
good.
all right. So Beau, like I said, Beau runs the East Meets West podcast. He's a writer, Peterson's Bow Hunting Journal. He gets in there. He's got you have your own, your own issues, right?
My own issues, in the
Well,
magazine.
I mean, we all have our own issues. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Did I see somewhere that you have like your own magazine where you can subscribe just to your
Oh yeah.
articles?
So I have my website. I have a blog
Okay.
that's on eastmeetswesthunt.com, and I have a section of blog articles there, and I'll link to some other ones I've written for other places, and then some of my own unique stuff there. That's just for the website itself. So.
Okay. Got it. So that's where you can find them. It's eastmeetswesthunt.com. Find them there if you guys like this. I'm sure you will, because Beau's pretty good, pretty cool dude. Okay. So you're in PA. Season starts in a few days. This is going to air like October 10th, I think. What was the day? It was October 12th it's going to air. So you're already going to have a week or two in of hunting because you guys open on Saturday.
Yep.
Where do you guys where are you hunting? And let's get a lay of the land for the type of terrain, and is it public, is it private? Let's kind of go over all those kind of scene setting scenarios.
Yeah, so where I'm from is northern Pennsylvania, which is mostly just big timber, I guess big woods, mountainous type terrain. So I don't really hunt any ag country around here at least. And so it's just unbroken timber, big logging cuts, oak ridges, hemlock and pine conifer type setting. So a lot of different, just big woods, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so I'm lucky that, where I live, there's in northern Pennsylvania alone, there's over 2 million acres of public lands. So I hunt mostly public. I do hunt private. There's a lot of private timber companies that are open to public hunting. So I do hunt a lot of those. Yeah, a whole bunch of kind of different mixture there of different kind of land, but it's all big timber type stuff is what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on Onyx Maps here, and yeah, that is a lot of big timber.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're looking at a piece of that magnitude, I mean, are you exploring new pieces every single year, just checking new stuff out, or are you kind of honing in on the best 500 acres you can find?
Yeah, I'm hunting new areas every single year. I mean, I'm going back to the same spots. I'll have my core areas that I find over the years that are the best that I always have those there. But at the same time, I just love going to new places. So I'm constantly, probably almost to a fault, finding new places because it's almost like going on an out of state hunt, even, when it's in your own state, when it's a new area and you don't have any past history there. I just don't tend to stick around very long in any areas, even if they're good, because like I said, I like seeing new places.
Yeah. The
And
adventure, man.
yeah, and just love getting to check that out. So that's for the most part, I'm bouncing around quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, and with that much land, you definitely could. I mean, we're talking thousands, tens of thousands of acres, probably hundreds of thousands of acres.
Yeah.
What
Oh
I'm
yeah.
just looking at right here in all these national forests. So when you're looking at that stuff, you guys that open October 3rd, pretty much the pre-rut in my mind kind of starts October 15th ish, depending on latitude and all that, but generally October 15th. So you just got a few weeks of kind of early season. You're almost off a summer season pattern, and then you're right into the pre-rut. as far as like the scouting aspect goes, when you're looking for good places that, October 15th rolls around and you're like, hey, the pre-rut's kind of kicking in. What are you looking for? What's your strategy for that time frame? Like the 15th to like the 25th or 30th?
So from like an at-home scouting standpoint, I'm online using Onyx and trying to figure out, all right, where are the places that I want to look for, and what I'm doing essentially is I'm using the hybrid feature the most because I'm looking where vegetation features and terrain features overlap. So I'm trying to
Okay.
find, so like say your typical, saddles, you get your points, you get your benches, all those things that are, every whitetail hunter hears those topics. But when you combine in the big woods where most time there's not a destination food source. A lot of places I hunt, there's not even any oak trees. So there's no like one place they're going to. They're feeding everywhere. There's browse everywhere. So there's not really much of patterns going on. But so that's why the pre-rut and the rut are definitely the best chances that you have in those locations. So anyways, I'm taking things like I want to find edges. Same thing that happens in farm country happens in the big woods where they love edges. So instead of being, edge of a field to big hardwoods, you're looking at, say, maybe a clear cut or a logging cut on the edge of, a hemlock thicket, or the open woods, the big cherry trees and oak trees. Like you're looking for those types of edges. And wherever I can find where the terrain might dictate them to walk, whether that be a bench or part of a saddle or a spur or anything like that, then those are areas I'm paying attention to.
Okay.
And that's what I'm trying to, as I'm looking online, I'll mark spots that have that. I like a lot of different vegetation. If I got, clear cuts and all these different type of things, those areas really, they stand out to me more than just, big unbroken timber of all what looks like, older trees. So I want to
Yeah.
find a mixture of things. That's my biggest thing from afar. And so when I go in to scout these areas, especially that time of year, what I'm looking for, I'm trying to find close to like where they're bedding. I mean, they don't bed in the same places
Sure.
very often, but they'll bed in certain areas. And so I'm looking for those, edges, maybe those older timber cuts they might be bedding on or towards the point of the hill. And then also trying to find, what are they feeding on at that time? It could be a side hill full of ferns that you just see trampled down. It's not like you're not finding, it's not as obvious. You kind of got to just use your senses. You're going in, you start seeing deer trails meandering around. It looks like they're kind of, stuff's patted down. That's where you're looking for. And then I'm focusing it on scrapes. That's like my number one thing that I'm doing, and not just, any scrape. I'm looking for the bigger, like community type scrapes. Normally, in the pre-rut phase, I'm focusing on them closer to bedding, trying to be, right on the edge of some thick cover is my ideal setup for that. And sometimes that might be a little bit higher in elevation towards the top of the mountain. But that changes a little bit when it goes into, as you start going into the rut. The way that I would use scrapes then is I'm focusing more on those travel areas. I'm always hunting around scrapes, whether I'm making them myself or if they're there. But then I might be focusing more as you get into November, especially into like even the second week in November. I'm focusing more on either I'm up towards the top of the hill, the saddles, some good benches that have travel to them, or even, that's kind of an unpopular opinion, but are creek bottoms. I focus a lot on creek bottoms if I can find where the deer are going to be narrowed down. Say they're coming from, one hill to another, they have to cross through the bottom there at some point. And if there's like a beaver pond or something else that's funneling them to one side, I've probably killed more of my bucks than any others in creek bottoms. So,
Really?
yeah.
Okay. So I like let's start there. Actually, let's not. Let's start at because I want to work my way to those travel areas. But scrapes. So
Yeah.
there are a couple things you mentioned. Can you explain what a community scrape is?
Yeah. So that's like a scrape that multiple bucks are using in does, but year after year. So you're finding maybe not just one licking branch. You might see 4, 5, 6 of them from the years you can see broke off. You can just see wear to them, and they
Okay.
typically, the area that scraped up on the ground is bigger, that, it's getting a lot more traffic essentially to it. And it's just like the hub of where they're all communicating, which,
Yeah.
community scrape. But essentially you can tell, like, when you find one of these, it doesn't look like one that, most scrapes are made, say, either testosterone driven. Buck might be walking down this logging trail and just start tearing up the ground or rip branch down. He might only do that once. So that's not something I want to key in on, where these areas where they're constantly communicating and they're rubbing their forehead glands up in the branches, and then,
Yeah.
other bucks that come through are all checking that, and those are the type of scrapes that I'm really focusing on.
Got it. Okay. I've really recently, I wouldn't say super recent, but about 5, 6 years ago, that idea was introduced to me, and I've really found it to be true. How I've personally found like those community scrapes, like you say, I mean, they almost look like small meteor holes in the ground. Like a lot of
Yep.
times it's just like, dude, something's been digging here for the last 20 years, you know?
Yep.
Um, but one of the other things that like trail cameras really help me on that is just kind of figuring out, because a lot of times like your, like, I call them like auxiliary or like satellite scrapes, they just kind of like will generally have a couple different bucks on them, and they won't hit them that off. They'll hit them like once every few days or something like that. Those community scrapes will almost be hit like every day, pretty much almost seems like every day, every other day at night. At least something will come check on them. Whereas those
Yeah.
satellite scrapes might not be that way. But the other big thing that I noticed is a lot of them tend to be on trail, like right almost on trails or at intersections of trails, where it's just
Yep.
like a blatantly obvious, like, here's an X marks the spot, boom, there's a big old community scrape there. That's
Yeah.
that's really helped me.
And
So go ahead.
And just to dive in a little bit further, like, they tend to be closer to bedding for the most part than other scrapes might be that you would
Yeah,
find, because, to be able for them to be used more, they're going to be, close to bedding. So, like, when
sure.
it's outside of, because their community scrapes are used year round, in my opinion. And I run cameras on them all the time. Like, that's what I run cameras on, and they might not pull off the ground, but they'll hit that licking branch all year.
Yeah,
And again, I'm speaking mostly from my area and what I see. Is with anything, sign is relative to where you're at. Different scrapes might look a little bit different in other places, but essentially that's kind of what I'm looking for in those.
no, I'm thinking about, so on the so we have our own 100 acres, but then I've also hunt a lot of public. I have 6,000 public acres within 5 to 30 minutes of my house. So now that you mentioned that close, I never tied that bedding area piece together. Now that you mentioned that, when I'm thinking about, because community scrapes there's not that many of them really when you
No,
really get
no, it's
after it.
one in 50 of them that you might find. Maybe even
Yeah.
less than that.
So on the public, like I know of 4 off the top of my head. And then on my property of 100 acres, I only have 1 that I've found so far.
Yep.
And they are all very close to bedding areas. So that, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that makes sense. Um, So you're keying in on those, like that's your biggest piece that you're after in the pre-rut. And then are you like hunting like within 20 yards of them, or are you trying to like just you kind of have an idea where they're bedding and you're trying to get between the bedding and the scrape, or how are you going about like keying in on those?
I'm usually hunting right over them. I mean,
Okay.
I'm usually hunting within 15 to 20 yards of the scrape, depending on how it all lays out. But that's, again, generally speaking, that's what I'm doing, because typically it's difficult to get much closer to where they're potentially bedding, because I don't know of a single bed, because they seem to be using an area rather than, actually, even tonight I was scouting and I jumped a buck, bedded down. I wouldn't have thought, there's a 100-acre clear cut there that they can bed on any corner of it, or, inside. So sometimes you're wrong with it. So I try to give them a little bit cushion, get close, but close enough that you could potentially get them in daylight, but at the same time, not really pushing the envelope. I've tried the whole like pushing super close to beds here, and haven't had a ton of luck with it. So not saying it
Yeah.
doesn't work. I'm just saying my
No.
personal, experience.
Oh, for sure, dude. I live 45 minutes from Dan Infalt.
Okay.
And so I can really, there's certain pieces that I can really relate to his style of tactics. Like, these bucks are bedding on this point of this marsh and there's 6 beds on there and that's where they're going to be, you
Yeah.
know, but I can also relate to other in that same piece. I come across that same 6,000 acre piece. I come across just areas, just kind of like you're saying, quarter acre areas where it's like anywhere in here is good. Like, and I've found them everywhere. And it seems
Yep.
like that even changes. I mean, I know it changes throughout the season where they like to be, because I'll find beds in the summer in totally different areas than I'll find in the winter, you know?
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I totally agree. Um, I think like you said earlier, it's relative to where you are and what style you're hunting.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. Couldn't agree more with that.
So then with, on the topic of scrapes to continue, you mentioned that you make some scrapes yourself too. You do some mock scrapes. Do you like, how do you set those up? Do you hunt directly over those as well? How does that work?
Yeah, mostly the same thing. I mean, I shouldn't say all the time I'm directly over them, like, um, but for the most part, I try to put one in front of my stand if I'm making a mock scrape, just to give it something for the deer to potentially check out. They might not, but like just to give them that, or a place for them to stop, and maybe in a shooting lane or something that I might have. So I'm typically doing that. But yeah, I'm just the way I create them as far as actually making them. I'm literally just kicking up the dirt below a good licking branch with my boots, and I'm not
Yeah.
using anything special. Just using my boots to do that. And then the branch, I try to have something that's a little over head height, give it a little bit higher than some scrapes, a decent size branch, maybe at least size your thumb around. And typically in our woods are on the favorite scraping trees are beech trees and hemlocks. So those are the two that I find the most
Huh.
scraping action on. So that's what I typically use for that.
Interesting. So then you just, like, if you how do you even figure out where you want to put one? Because like I'm thinking about that, like, so you're gonna go cut some hemlock, and then where are you, like, how are you even putting it? I know how I do it. I want to hear how you do it.
So yeah, it depends if there's a trail crossing near me, I'm gonna put it right there. That's
Okay.
generally what I'm gonna do. Otherwise, any little flat spot, because normally where I'm hunting, like I said, there's some terrain. So if I'm on the side of a hill, if there's any
Sure.
sort of little bench, even something small enough that you can't even see, an onyx, like small enough, but I'm putting it there, and I'm trying to keep it at the point too where, say there's a trail below it, I might sit, a little bit further down from that. So if the wind's coming in a direction, they can scent check it, 15 yards away, which some of them tend to do as you start getting closer to the rut, but still not, wind me at the same time.
Yeah.
What I try to, I guess I try to put it a little bit upwind of where I plan on sitting.
Got it. So then essentially, like, you're coming in and looking at it and you're like, okay, here's a trail crossing. This would be a great spot for a mock scrape. All right, if I put one here, where am I going to sit? And how would the deer, if the deer don't go to it and they go downwind, like, am I far enough away? So kind of, you need to be at least like 30 yards from that scrape so that they can slip in between you somehow.
Yeah, and again, I don't always think of it that way. It all depends on how the terrain dictates that. But
Sure.
sometimes, yeah, that's exactly, how I'm doing it. Because yeah, you're exactly right. So that's kind of my general rule of thumb with it.
So being a mountain guy, do you, like, is there any way you think about using the thermals? Like, if you're sitting there going, I think the deer will probably hit this in the evening versus the morning, and do I set it up like this or that based on typical wind direction or thermal direction?
I try not to think too much about it. I mean, because honestly, you can overcomplicate it
Yeah.
very easily. And what I've found is especially here, our ridges aren't always like perfectly, flat across or anything. And they'll like come in and out and have a bunch of little spurs coming off it. So essentially your regular thermals aren't working the way they're supposed to. You're getting a lot of swirling winds. You're getting a lot of things going on. So in a perfect scenario, yes, I would, consider that. But for the most part, I'm not. Like and even like when I'm hunting these places, like I try to have the wind in my favor with thermals. Like if I'm hunting, like just say a morning spot or an evening spot, I'm definitely considering thermals. But as I get from like the later pre-rut into the rut, I'm sitting all day, and I'm not going to change trees in the middle of the day because the wind starts shifting. Otherwise, I'd be jumping from tree to tree all day and I wouldn't kill a thing. So a lot of it is risking it. And yeah, I know that's, again, it's not something that sounds sexy, I guess, with it, but that's the way I've chosen to take that on. So
No, I get it. And now, like, you bring up a great point of like full day sits, which is another piece I want to get to, but I want to tackle this scrape topic first.
yeah, keep going.
So okay, so you got your mock scrapes, you got your community scrapes, satellites. You mentioned that if you see me like messing around with stuff, I'm writing down notes because my memory is just like shot. I don't know. I think it's too many concussions. But so you mentioned like travel scrapes. Like you're kind of when you're in the pre-rut, you're hunting these like flat kind of destination scrapes outside of a bedding area, community scrapes, bigger scrapes. During the rut, you're looking at more of like travel area scrapes. Can you explain like what that means?
Yeah. So, and I should say there is places that you can find both in one, and there's certain creek bottom spots that I have where it seems like the does and even sometimes the bucks will bed a little bit lower on the mountain than they typically do. Like if you get well, almost like it being a bowl. So if you're picturing a bowl where you got a bunch of drainages running up each
Yeah.
side, and you get that spot where it kind of hubs down there in the center,
Mhm.
terrible for wind, but it can be really good for travel. And so you got a lot of travel coming there at all times, and you can find a community scrape right there. Might not be bedding right there, but there's enough travel
Yeah.
that you can find a community scrape, and it's a good rut spot. So those are really freaking ideal when it comes down to finding those. But if you're looking at, some of your other typical rut spots, you say you're hunting a saddle, so you got, a drainage that's running up, it's real steep, and then you're finding a slightly flatter spots coming around. Maybe the deer are using the side of that drainage to run up, go over the other side of the hill, and check doe bedding areas.
Sure.
Then those scrapes typically aren't as I'm not finding as many community scrapes in those type of areas as I am just, still finding good scrapes, but not like your home
Your
run
big
type
heavy ones.
scrape.
Yeah.
In that point, I'm more focusing on travel because, a lot of times the typical feeding patterns with bucks here are up and down. So
Oh, okay.
if they're bedded on a hill, say there's cherry trees that are dropping black cherries below, the pattern might be coming down, or say there's an oak flat on the top, they're going up. So what the bucks are going to do is they're going to run parallel to them. So the does are running up, they're going to run parallel around the hills and check all those doe trails. That's their thing, trying to get scent. And that's why they run ridges that way. They're usually not running on the top, they're running just over the edge,
Mm-hmm.
and they're wrapping around, and then they'll drop down across the creek and go up another side. And that's generally the way they're doing it. So I'm trying to, get in those travel patterns and add some things like, that's why like in a saddle or in just any sort of drainage that comes up at the top of it, you're able to get multiple areas where a buck might be coming from one hill to another, but also running this typical rut pattern there. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm looking at with that.
Oh man, that's complex.
Yeah, no, it
Complex
is
to
and
my
it
like
isn't
cornfield
though.
walk from the woods to the cornfield.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. Like once you figure out what you're looking for, and I've grown up doing this, so I'm not trying to make
Sure.
it sound complicated, but like once you kind of recognize that sign, I'm sure if you went and did it, you'd be able to take your knowledge you applied from farm country and be able to figure it out. Like it's just, yeah, that's just what I've observed over the
Yeah.
years of it, you know?
So then those like travel scrapes are generally just like areas. They're not, like you said, super heavily hit. They're just they're like kind of running their route, and hell, this is a good spot to put one. Let's
Not,
just
not, yeah, not as many of the bucks that might travel through there are going to be, that's not gonna be their home scrape. They're
yeah.
not their territorial. And to another point, I guess I should mention is in these areas that I'm hunting, for the most part here, deer densities are low. And it's a pretty good buck to doe ratio. So these bucks are traveling a decent ways to try to find does. So they're covering ground. They're like these travel routes. So that's, I guess, a very good point I
Okay.
should mention. And, you know, that's where like Pennsylvania is so um, different in different parts of the state. You can go even 45 minutes south of me in some places, and you can have an overpopulation deer, ton way more doe than bucks, and you can go, you know, east, and it'll be it's all situational to pockets. But in low deer density areas, these bucks are traveling a lot during the rut. I mean, you can. Last year, I was filming a buck that my uncle killed 4.5 miles away during the rut. So like it's
Yeah.
incredible, and that's not, I mean, I can rattle off a bunch of stories where that type of stuff has happened. So they're putting on some miles because the girls are few and far in between.
Yeah. No, I would be putting on miles then too.
Yeah, exactly, that's the same thing.
Yeah, I did have one year. I had a buck that I had on camera at like 5 o'clock at night, in one area, and I got him on camera the next morning, from one community scrape to the next, actually, and it was about a mile and a half.
Yep.
Got him on both of them. You know, he just went there overnight, which a mile and a half, like people tend to think that's a long distance, but for a deer, 10, 15 minutes,
Oh
you know,
yeah, I would say
if
that
they really
that's
feel like it.
nothing.
Yeah.
It was one of the biggest bucks I'd ever was hunting. I missed him one morning on November 15th. It was the last day of our season in 2015. And he came after that. I checked my cameras, and he covered over 2 miles from in less than 18 hours. And like, I mean, probably, I mean, he slept for most of it and then covered the rest. He
Yeah,
covered like,
right.
he hit three of my cameras in like an hour and a half, and like
Holy
around a
cow.
mile distance. And like it was kind of cool to like look at it on Onyx and just kind of connect to figure out how he was running the land. And you know, you're a lot of assumptions going on, but it was kind of cool to get to see that. You know, I mean,
Oh yeah.
they've got to hit. Well, I think they got to hit a lot of bars to try to find the women. Essentially, you know, they're not going to one big nightclub. They got to hit a bunch of these dive bars around to be able to figure it out. So
Right. Yeah. Eventually one dive bar will hold them.
yeah, yeah. Eventually they'll find the mother load there.
Right. Yeah. That's, yeah. I'm not going to say anything about my wife right now.
Yeah, yeah. Better watch yourself.
um, so yeah, I've had that experience as well. And I think it's something everybody should try to do at some point, which is get 4, 5, 6 trail cameras and drop them on, like, generally like a scrape line. You know, if you can find a scrape line and drop them on there just to see, like, maybe a buck only hits, you know, scrape 1 and scrape 4, and they miss scrape 2 and 3, and why, I don't know, but it'll give you that insight. Because I did that one year across the course. Like I had, like I just said, that one, and I also had 2 more cameras on a scrape line, like in that area, and he didn't hit the other 2, and I don't know why or anything. I eventually ended up seeing him at 55 yards, and he was coming out of a pretty thick bedding area, but he didn't. And there was a scrape right by me, but he didn't care to touch it. I don't know why. He just didn't. He actually like looped around it, and it definitely had nothing to do with me sitting right over top of it. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Maybe it did. I'm not sure, but I did a pretty good job getting in and entry and exit with my wind and everything. But so one of the other questions that I always kind of think about is bucks hitting very specific scrapes. Have you noticed that at all? Like, you get 20 scrapes or something like that, and they're really only keying in on 5 of them.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it all depends on the buck's personality essentially, but like some bucks, like they have their scrape. It's like their hometown, again, let's just use a bar for relation. I'm not trying to relate everything to
Yeah.
this, but essentially I think that's their place. That's their place they want to go. They might go out for dinner over here and here, but this is their hometown restaurant that they're at. And essentially that's the way they use it. It's usually close to their bed. If you see a buck that's hitting the same scrape over and over again, you're probably, within a pretty decent, pretty close to where he may be betting at a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
that's the way I've kind of looked at it. But yeah, there's definitely bucks that own, scrapes, and that's
Yeah.
when you find
So
that's a pretty perfect storm.
there's a buck there's a buck that on a buddy's property. They have like the rights. They own like 200. His name's Parker. If any of my actual listeners are checking this out, like he's been on the podcast a bunch of times. And he's like my best friend. I was the best man at his wedding. He was the best man at mine. Like, and we share all this information. It's funny because sometimes he has cousins that hunt his property and they don't share trail camera pictures, but
That's funny.
he'll share them with me. But he was saying he kept getting this big 8, just 130 inch 140 inch, just like real thick and short, but the body, like he's one of those 250-pound deer that just like doesn't have a giant rack, 5 years old or whatever. And he would only come onto their property, like they have like 300 acres that they can hunt. He would only come onto about 20 acres of it, hit a scrape, and then leave. That was it. So it's almost like the boundary of his territory or
Yeah.
something. Like, this is where my territory stops. I'm going to hit this. And they would get that big one hitting it and one other big one that also wouldn't ever go past that area. So like those two knew, like, this is mine, this is yours.
Interesting.
And then one of the coolest things happened is opening morning of gun season. They had the trail camera on there. The buck came and hit it, and the guy killed him sitting in the stand, and they got the trail camera picture of the buck making the scrape with the guy pulling up his gun in the background.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's
So it's a
crazy.
pretty cool picture. I don't have it anymore. I think they sent it to me in Snapchat or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a real big, thick, 8-point. But that's the only instance I've ever kind of heard of that like scenario. But
Yep.
I have personally encountered different scrapes where it's like these 4 bucks hit this scrape, and they're like pretty much the only 4 that'll hit it. And then
Yep.
you'll have a different scrape, 60 yards away, and you'll get 10 bucks that hit it. And it's just kind of like, why? I'm not 100% sure, but I think if people are out there trying to figure out where to put their cameras and what scrapes to go after and target, I think it's really just kind of like moving it around,
Yeah.
moving them around and checking them out, different ones. And then also like the dates, man, time of year is like everything on those scrapes. Cause sometimes I remember one year I got like all my action on one scrape between October 22nd and the 27th. I had all the good bucks in the area that I wanted to target, hit the scrape in those 5 days, and they never touched it again.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
then so like my thoughts on that is like that's what I'm seeing the most like action with them. But if on some of those like real like community scrapes near I'll find, I mean, I'll get bucks hitting them in the summertime like regularly, working them. And then but when you find, like, if you're thinking, then getting into the pre-rut phase, yeah, there'll be hot times like when I start getting daylight activity, like,
yeah.
and usually for I see is a lot of correlation of weather with that. Cold
Okay.
fronts, I mean, just like boom, that's when lights turn on. Like I can go back and look at my trail camera data for the last 8 years, and any daylight photos, not saying all of them, but a majority of them, especially if it's in like that middle to late October, is correlated with a cold front.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that's been a big topic on the podcast so far, even especially with early season, right? There were a bunch of guys on that were like, I don't even hunt unless it's after a cold front. You know,
Yeah.
I'll go mess around on public and kind of dink around, but I'm not touching my food plots until, I get a cold front. It's just that change in pressure, change in temperature, change in wind. There's all sorts of things that really get those deer up on their feet. Um, okay. So I think we've kind of beat the scrape topic to death. Was there anything else that you had? I mean, as far as like dates go, I have, like, if I'm hunting scrapes, I'm really not hunting scrapes in November. I'm more of going after like pinch points and funnels. I feel like bucks are really into scrape. Then this is personal opinion. Please disagree with me if you disagree. um, but like I feel like bucks go and check those scrapes and they're looking for does and looking for sign and trying to get that first active or for that first in estrus doe. But then once kind of like you get one doe and then you get three does and then you get 7 and then you get 15 and then you get 20 and then you get 30. And then at that point, they're like, I don't even need to check scrapes because I'm going over here and there's going to be a hot doe and I'm done with it. Because I like my scrape activity goes down between like November 5th and like the 15th to 20th.
Oh
Do
yeah,
you experience the
I
same thing or
totally
no?
agree with that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I
Oh,
still
you
have,
do? Okay.
yeah, I do. I definitely do. My cameras slow way down, and they don't like completely stop with scrapes, but what I've learned is they'll still be in the area, but they might not be hitting that scrape. So like I know I can think of a situation where I was sitting in a stand and I saw 7 bucks in one day. It was like November 7th, and that's a lot of bucks for the area I'm in
It's a
because
lot
there's
of
a
bucks
hot
in
doe
20.
in the area. But my camera was there, and not one of them went in front of that camera. I mean, they were all around. They were under my tree, and if I
Huh.
was going just by that camera data on that scrape, I'd be like, this spot sucks. There hasn't been a deer here in forever. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that yeah, I've definitely saw that like they're not hitting that scrape specifically. Normally scrapes are in travel areas so that they might be traveling through, but to hit that scrape, not so much.
Yeah. And do you have any idea why? I mean, I don't. That's my guess is like they just don't give a shit at that point.
I think they're just in zombie mode at that point, and they're just like either on a hot doe. I don't know. That's kind of what I've seen is they just seem to be like usually on a trail of something, like their nose is at the ground and
Right.
they're just going. And that's kind of what I've seen with it. So
Yeah.
and scrape activity actually starts to pick up a little bit for me in around like November 17th, 18th, somewhere in there. And then once gun season hits, they're laying down underneath
Right.
rocks.
Disappear.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gun season. Like, we don't even need to talk about that because it's just chaos.
Yeah, it's not yeah, anything to talk about. That stops right then.
Right. Oh man, in Wisconsin last year, they tried. So we had a real bad year for Wisconsin gun season last year.
Mhm.
Um, it was like 65 degrees and foggy, and the majority of crops were still standing. So our deer harvest was like, I don't know, 25 to somewhere between 25 and 30% down. And so then they put out like a survey to try to like see what people thought after the one year. And some of the like questions, and I just remember being like, are you ridiculous right now? Are you kidding me? They're like, maybe we should make our gun season instead of 9 days, let's add an extra week and move it closer to the rut. And I'm like, get out of here. That was
Oh yeah.
handily voted down.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? Like, no, thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
it just fell on last year. Wisconsin's gun season just fell on a shit week. Like it really did, just weather
Yeah.
wise. And they wanted to change everything based on one week when it's been working phenomenal for the last 15 years. Like, get out of here, you
Yep.
know? Some politician didn't get the buck that they were after and got pissed, right? that's
Yeah.
that's what happened. But no, I'm super curious as to why the bucks. If any of the listeners out there understand that, please write in and let me know. I appreciate that because curious as to why they really just like kind of lag behind in scrapes during like peak rut. And I have to imagine it's because they're like, I don't need to run the scrape because I know where the hot does are. And then maybe afterwards, like that 17th time frame that you said, maybe they're like, all right, I can't really find one. Let's go check a scrape and see what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So then what about, aside from scrapes, do you do anything with rubs? We haven't even mentioned it, but do you care about them at all?
Not really. The thing that I do with rubs is I'm looking at, if I start seeing a cluster of rubs on the edge of thick stuff, normally I'm going to find a buck bed close. Like, so essentially you'll find the rubs coming out, exit trails out of the beds. Those are ones I'm going to pay attention to more, but random rubs in the woods,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the
I'm
same
not.
boat there. Like, I'm not a huge fan of like hunting rubs. Maybe if there's a real specific like rub line, like I can literally stand on the trail and see like 4 rubs down the trail, right? And I know
Yep.
that there's a bedding area at the end of it. Then I'm like, okay, like there's definitely like I know there's deer in here because there's a bed on the end of this, like 100 yards away. But now I know like there's probably a good buck in here based on these rubs. Or
So what I'll see with rubs is, like, say if I have a point of a hill coming out, I'll start seeing rubs scattered a little bit, and as they start clustering closer and closer, I'm getting closer to the bed. That's kind of
okay.
how I've used that.
Got it.
That's
Yeah.
that's a perfect scenario. It doesn't always work that pretty, but
Yeah.
like that's how you look at it. Or I found some giant rubs last weekend scouting, and they were on the edge of this old clear cut, real thick side hill. So I'm like, it's probably a bedding area. And it was a good trail that ran right on the edge of this. So, in a hemlock tree. So I made a big mock scrape myself right there on the edge of that rub line. So I'm kind of using it at that point.
Yeah.
But generally, I'm not focusing much on rubs. I mean, I'm paying attention to them, but they're not something that's like, I found
You're
one
sitting
big
over.
rub, I need to sit over it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a mistake like brand new hunters make, like hunters in like the first year or second year. They're like, dude, I found a huge rub. I'm going to go sit by this thing. Because a
Yeah.
lot of times, I mean, that buck will make that once and then never come back to it. Sometimes they'll use it more. So last year it was the first time this ever happened. I had a trail camera just on a trail and I randomly put it in like the perfect spot. And I think it was 6 or 7 bucks hit the same rub over the course of like 2 weeks. They just kept coming back to this, tree, 2 inches in diameter, and they just
Yeah.
kept hitting it. And I just luckily put my camera in the right spot. But it was something really unique, and I've never seen it before, and I think it's because there's not an area to make a scrape there, so they just use that tree as like kind of that spot.
hmm
So I tested that. So I have a mock scrape, like 6 or 7 feet from that rub this year.
Okay.
So I haven't checked it yet. So I want to go check that, but I'm curious as to how that's going to shake out. The other thing with rubs that I'm really curious about as well is like in this marsh area that I hunt, sometimes I'll come across like a stand of like young poplar trees. They're pretty much like young birch or young aspen
Yep.
trees, essentially. And deer, for whatever reason, really like to rub those. And sometimes I'll come across just like, a 20 by 20 area or a 30 by 30 area where pretty much every tree in that little stand is rubbed. And to me, that kind of like signifies it's not just like a passing rub. Like this is like a destination area where bucks come to, destroy these trees.
Yep.
So I'm going to hunt. I have a piece on public that I found last spring like that. I've hunted a piece on public like that before, had a great encounter with a nice 8-point. I hunted it 3 times. I finally had a great encounter with a nice 8-point. Should have shot it. Really should have shot it. I was sitting flat on the ground with my ass on the ground. And at the first chance I saw him, he was at 8 yards and he's walking right at me. He walked to 2 yards, turned sideways, made a rub at like 11 yards. I watched him the whole time and then walked off. Like I was just kind of like paralyzed, somewhat in fear, somewhat in like, can I even move? But and I don't know if that was random occurrence or not. So, that's my only other piece on rubs. Otherwise I'm in the same boat as you. Kind of like, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah.
So, Creek bottoms, right? You talked about those. You said people don't really like to hunt them. It's kind of taboo a little bit, or a little bit like off. But you've had a lot of success with there. Like, what is it that about creek bottoms that are a little taboo, and what do you think you do that gives you success there?
Most of the time, like what I hear from other people is it's nighttime activity. There's a lot of stuff laid down there because the ground's softer, so it shows a lot more like scrapes and stuff. But it's normally night activity, and the fact that the wind is never good, which can be the situation. So I'll explain the way I look at it is, so creek bottoms not all are created equal, and ones that have extremely steep hills that come down to it, I don't normally hunt, because at that point you're literally just getting swirling winds and it's just not as good. But if you get a spot that comes down and you have like a more of a flat creek bottom in there,
Okay.
and those are the areas that I'm focusing on more, because and then generally they're big enough where you start getting beavers damming up some stuff. You're getting a little more swampy material there. So then that's starting to funnel things down. And so you're looking at, say, a November morning, November 5th, you got 28 degrees or so. No matter what, those thermals, no matter what the regular wind direction is doing, those thermals, if you're hunting close enough to the creek, are running down that creek. And sometimes they'll do that all day, for almost all day. You might have a little bit where it switches, but I'd say for the majority of the day it's blowing down. And then, if I like to set up right on the edge of those beaver ponds, if possible, because that water is typically going to be warmer than the air. So that takes your thermals and pulls them up. So essentially you're getting air coming to you, the wind, and it comes right behind you and goes up. So even if a deer is walking on the other side of that beaver pond, maybe 75 yards from you, wind's blowing that way, but he'll never get it. So there's
Yeah.
little tricks like that can be. But then there's also times I've hunted creek bottoms when it's 55 degrees and I can't get the wind right. Like, this is all from just learning and figuring that out. But they're smaller. Like the ones I'm talking about are smaller, like feeder type streams, say anywhere from 4 feet across to 10 to 12 feet. Not huge. They're not rivers. They're just small, is it my Pennsylvania way of saying it, crick. But
It's
that's
okay. I understand. What is it
yeah.
like the meat eater says? Like a creek has a tire in it, I think, and a creek has trout in it.
Is that what it is?
I
Well, it's
think,
funny if I read something, like if I'm reading something on a map, I'll say creek. But when I'm saying it, like if I'm just talking about it, I say crick. I don't know why I do that, but that's just like the way it is. But essentially
yeah,
those are the type of things with creek bottoms, and a lot of times doe groups will bed in those bottoms as well, like right on the edge of the hill. They'll be usually, because it's wet and stuff down there, you get more vegetation. It can be thicker in spots. So I'm
yeah,
getting does bedding there, so bucks are traveling through and checking them out. That's been my findings with that.
got it. Yeah, and I got to imagine also like with creek bottoms, um, you know, we all try to find like limiting factors. Like that's really the objective with deer hunting, is like find limiting factors. Like where's the limiting food? Where's the limiting water? Where's the limiting travel corridors and travel routes? And when you can find a creek that has, one crossing every 50 or 60 yards, like that's a very limited, you know, scenario where you can set up accordingly for that. I'm having a real hard time with a creek bottom at my property. It's it's the best portion of the property, and it's the hardest to hunt because my wind, like in
Yep.
one morning, I had deer wind me 30 yards behind me and 60 yards in front of me within
Yeah.
15 minutes. And I'm like, what is going on here? I don't understand. Like, how is this even possible?
That's where, and again, it's all situational. There's places I have like that I want to hunt so bad and I just can't because the wind just never cooperates.
Yeah, I'm
And
still gonna
so
try.
yeah.
I'm trying this year. I had a podcast with Zach Farrenbaugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just had one with him too, and
Yep.
you're right, he's all about ground hunting. Um, so he instilled some ground hunting thoughts into my head, and I got some options. Him and I sat down after the podcast and kind of went through Onyx, and he was like, "This is what I would do." So I'm gonna give it a shot and see if I can. I mean, I can't screw it up more, really. So whatever, it resets every few weeks anyway, especially during the rut. Like whatever you do on Monday is totally gone by Wednesday. Like no one even cares.
No, no, that's my thought with it too. I am definitely more aggressive than I am, laid back when it comes to deer hunting. I make usually more of the power moves and some more risky type things than
Yeah.
I screw up a lot with that, but also I feel like it comes with some good things too.
Oh, for sure. So then when you're in those creek bottoms, are you up in a tree or are you on the ground?
I'm in a tree. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm typically in a tree. Like so they're awkward trees. They're never, there's not usually good trees in there, but I'll get, I might only be 6 to 10 feet off the ground, but essentially I'm going to be in a tree. So
Okay. Yeah. So then, okay, you got all those swirling winds down there and you just kind of figure it out via thermals. And that's something you learn over time because like you said, every creek bottom's not the same.
yep,
So like check it out. And if it sucks, it sucks. And then you got to figure it out otherwise. Um, Sean Luchtel from Heartland Bowhunter was on a couple weeks ago and he was saying he has a spot like that and he'll only hunt it when it's dead calm, because when it's dead calm and you're in there in the morning and it's hot, like warms up, your thermals will rise and then you're fine. But if it's not dead calm, like get out of there because that wind's just gonna whip around.
yep.
And
That's another very good point too.
yeah. Um. So okay, those creek bottoms, travel routes. So then during the rut, I mean, so if like you'd mentioned, we talked about this earlier, but essentially we're not hunting scrapes at that point. We're more hunting travel routes, right? So what are those? Can you outline what those look like in your area?
Yeah, I mean it's very similar to the pre-rut stuff. But I'm looking at saddles are a big one. Again, you've heard that, and anytime
Okay.
anybody talks about the rut, but so saddles, and usually when I'm hunting saddles, it all depends on like what part of the hill I'm hunting. It depends on where they're essentially bedding. So like in hill country, there's a topography line that they'll bet on that changes every place. But when you by scouting and doing things and figuring out kind of where they're bedding and where some of those trails run, you'll figure out where you need to be at, and that changes by
Okay.
food, by terrain, all of that stuff. So saddles are a big thing.
So are you on the same elevation? Like, so if you go through in the spring or if you went through, a week ago and you kicked out a bunch of does and you're like, okay, so this is a bedding area over here. This is a thick, nasty bedding area. Are you
Yep,
like roughly on that same elevation, just moving around based on the wind?
trying to, yeah,
Okay.
just like I might be half a mile away from some of those spots, but if I'm finding a bunch of deer bedded in those similar areas, then that's gonna be a tall tale sign. I mean, I don't pay attention to it a ton like in the spring and winter, because sometimes they'll be lower in elevation depending on the
Yeah.
snowfall. If we don't get a lot of snow, it won't push them down, but that's something I definitely pay attention to because that'll help you with it. So I'm focusing on those areas, and also just side hills in general. Any benches that are on there, again, checking from bedding areas, and I'm trying to get in between doe bedding areas, and then the creek bottoms. Those are my main rut zone funnels that I'm looking at. Because, and I guess throw another thing in there is some of the ground I hunt that's big woods is not as hilly or steep. It's you got some swamps mixed in, you got some other stuff. And at that, it's just hard edges. I'm looking for hard edges that are running things. So
Okay.
like old clear cuts, 10 years and older, does tend to bed towards the outside, maybe in a little bit, but on the downwind side of those, buck will cruise those, just the scent check the clear cuts.
Yeah.
And so those are areas that are decent rut funnels as well.
Okay. So essentially, I mean, what I'm hearing over and over is doe bedding area and relationship to that is what
Yep.
is important to you.
Yep. So yeah, very, very,
Okay.
very true.
Yeah. And that
So
means
less
like,
about buck bedding at that point and
yeah.
more about doe bedding.
Okay. Yeah. Find the women, find the boys, right?
Yep, exactly right.
Hopefully the man. Hopefully the man.
Yeah, exactly.
um, okay. Um, And when I'm thinking about this in like the mountains and the hill country, the only way I can, like, I mean, looking at this on Onyx right now, all I see is big timber. So like I feel like the only way to figure out where those doe bedding areas are, aside from the clear cut piece, is really getting in there, boots on the ground, and just trying to understand that piece.
Yeah, a lot of it's that, and then all you can kind of um, guesstimate a little bit. Say again, it is so difficult, but generally the upper thirds of the hill, or you'll find some stuff in the bottoms, depending on how the bottoms look.
Okay.
But so you can kind of get the gist of that, and depending on the wind direction, what side of the hill they're probably going to be on. So if you got a northerly
Yeah.
wind, they're probably going to be bedded on the south face a little bit. Or
Sure.
if it's in the summertime, or like earlier season when it's hotter, they're going to be on a north face and some darker timber versus on a southern slope
Yeah.
during the colder weather, so where they get some more sun. So that all comes into play. But yeah, a lot of it's
Okay.
me walking in there and bumping them out of their beds to know that they're there.
Yeah, and that's like for a lot. I mean, that was a huge question I had for a long time. Is like people
Yep.
always talk about doe bedding and buck bedding, and I'm like, how do you even know? And really, like the thing that just like helped me really learn it is just like walking through it. Like
Yeah, that's and
there it
yeah.
is. You know,
Yep.
the only the two ways when I have so like at my old job I had a new hunter who just was like coming on board and he was trying to figure that out, and so I told him I was like, there's two ways you can like really figure out bedding areas, and one is to just walk through it, like just take a gander and just go walking. When you kick up does or you kick up a buck, like that's where they were bedding, so that's where they were. The other way to do it is like if you're hunting a specific area and it gets dark at 7 and you start seeing deer at 5, you're probably pretty damn close to that bedding area, right?
Yep.
If you're seeing deer at 6:50, 6:55, you're probably pretty far from that bedding area because they're probably getting up within an hour, maybe an hour and a half, sometimes on the outside like 2 hours before evening, depending on the pressure. And the closer you are to them, the earlier you're going to see them. So
Yep.
that's kind of like those are the two ways that I kind of told him. Um, and that's how I do it too. If I
Yep.
don't know the area. Um, so okay, so rubs, travel areas. Do you have any other like? So we talked. You mentioned full day sits.
Yeah.
So you're camping out, and I have very mixed opinions and mixed thoughts, and I'm so indecisive in the tree on this. It's like
Yeah.
I get up at 4 a.m. and I'm like I'm gonna sit here all day, and by like 11 I'm like where can I move?
Yeah.
So what are you? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm an all day guy. I like to
Same
sit all
spot all
day,
day.
same spot all day. Don't move. I've killed more of my bucks middle of the day than I have any other time. I've never killed a buck in the rut first thing in the morning. So if anything, I'm gonna sleep in a little bit, walk in at first light, and hunt all day rather than trying to get there an hour before it gets light and then leave by 10 or 11. Like I want to during the rut, I'm gonna sit all day unless I'm 2.5 days into a spot or something's not feeling right or something completely goes, or I get a hunch for something, I might move middle of the day, but for the most part, I'm staying in the same spot.
So why not move if it's like noon and you ain't seen shit? Why aren't you like, man, it's because some people are like, if it's on, it's on, and if you're in it, you're in it, and if you're out of it, you're out, and you need to go find it.
Low deer
Um,
densities. So low deer density means that it's you might not see deer for 3 days. You might not, but when it does happen, you could see a really good buck. So there's a lot of hoping with that. I mean, that's where
yeah.
it's like, but at the same time, I've just learned it so long that like a spot can be cold for literally 2 days and it can just turn on that next day. And, a lot of people don't want to wait for that, and that's fine. And sometimes I am that guy that doesn't want to, but I've found that I'm way more successful if I waited out than I have been jumping around. I've tried the whole, even as last year, I moved around like crazy hunting different spots. And I was like, why did I do this? You know, like I made it worse on myself than if I would have stayed in some of these spots. I know they're good. I just, when you have low deer densities, it takes a while sometimes for bucks to travel through.
Yeah.
So that's, again, that's
I could see
all
that.
situational, but that's where how I've learned to do it and how we've kind of done it around here.
I could see that, like, from that perspective. I think you have to have, in order to do that, you have to have a lot of confidence in the spot.
Oh yeah. If you,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, like, I mean, because the grass is always greener on the other side, right? So if
yeah,
you have that mentality, and I did it last year. Like, I set a spot. It turns out, like, after studying the property for, a year and really combing it and scouting it, like, I was in one of the best spots I could be in. But I saw a couple does right away, and by like noon, I was like, I'm out.
yeah,
I should have stuck around, because like trail cameras and everything were showing me like those were the travel routes to be in that I was closest to. But I just didn't have the confidence in it.
yeah. So one of the things I will do though, if I see like a bunch of bucks cruising at 80 yards, I will move closer to that. Like,
Oh yeah.
if it's like I start seeing two or three that do that, I'm like, I need to move. Like you got to do it. So,
Tear down.
but yeah, I think the biggest, like, to be successful during the rut is it's a mental game. Like you got to be confident in your spots, and I'm not saying I always am because I'm definitely not. I'll be driving to a stand in the morning, slam on the brakes 3 or 4 different times, turn down this road, cut back. I'm like, where am I going? Like I don't even know where I'm going. But at the same time, like
uh
once you're there, you gotta believe it because otherwise, my mind's like, there ain't been a deer here in 3 weeks. You know, you get that kind of, and once you do that, you're
yeah.
killing yourself. You're ready. You know, you're losing.
Dude, I'm laughing because I do the same shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, I will pull into 2 or 3 different parking spots and be like, gosh, should I go here? Nah, this spot looks better. And then I'll drive to that new spot and I'll be like, I should have gone to the first spot. And I'll drive to the first
Yep.
spot and be like, maybe I should have gone to that other spot.
Yep.
Just back and forth and trying to figure out, which one's gonna hold them on that day. And like, I think there comes a point where, like, you have a handful of spots that you're extremely confident in, and you just gotta be lucky that day.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
Totally. Totally. There is definitely a lot of luck that comes involved with it.
yeah, especially during the rut. Like, I mean, hopefully the doe in the neighborhood pops off and it's on,
Yep.
right?
Time in the tree is what your friend with that.
Yeah. Um, so then as far as like full day sits go, are you like running? I know, do you run a tree stand? You just running a lone wolf tree stand or what?
No, I'm hunting out of a saddle for the
Oh,
most
are you?
part. Yeah, for the
What
most
saddle do
part.
you run?
I have a tethered Phantom that I'm
Okay,
running,
nice.
and I use their Predator platform. So that's what I've
Okay,
been. This is only my second year using the saddle. For the most part, I ran. I had a Hawk Helium setup. They don't even make the stand anymore, but I had
sure.
that, and I ran those mostly mobile setups. I've done it a bunch of different ways. I've done it where I've hauled in a bunch of stands 2 weeks before the season because that's when we're allowed here. A bunch of
Okay.
heavy steel stands and the big sticks that that clip together that you get
Yeah.
for $40 at Field and Stream. I've done all those different routes, and I've just found that a saddle is a lot nicer on the back, and I can bounce around the spots. They don't work in every situation for me. If I'm trying
Yeah.
to get into a hemlock tree or something, I want to have a platform stand just because I can't with all the branches.
Yeah.
But I mean, last year I think I hunted out of a regular stand once or twice. Other than that, I was out of the saddle the whole time, and I literally got it in middle of October. I just jumped in and started using it, which I don't recommend. I'd recommend practicing with it, but at the same time, I learned it very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you learn pretty quick when you're in it like every day.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I was
exactly.
I was in the same boat. Like, the first saddle I bought was a tethered Manus, and I ran that for a year, and then I tried out, just I wanted to explore different ones, and I tried out an Arrow Hunter. Um, and I think saddles are kind of like boots or like jeans. Like, some of them fit just fit different people better.
Yep.
And it'd be so freaking nice. Like $1 million idea is just like somebody buy up 100 saddles of each and just send them out to people to try on and shit. Because that's like everybody's biggest complaint. But anyway, I tried on the Arrow Hunter. It fit me better. So then I've been running that one since. And I'm a big fan of the saddles, and I like pretty much will run them all year round. And especially on public, I run them all year round. And every now and then, like there's, like you were saying, there's specific trees that'll they set up better for a tree stand.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I'm running a saddle. And then on the private, like, I have all permanent tree stands set up. Right. I mean, it's just, that's the convenience of private land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Four-wheelers and tree stands.
Yeah.
That's why you do that. So you don't need to like deer cart the deer out or cut it up in the field or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
It's just easier. But yeah, so hunting out of the saddle full day, like as far as comfort goes, on a scale of 10, are you like, 9 or 10 out of 10?
I'd say same as I am on a tree stand.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's any better or worse. It's just different. I mean, you can adjust a lot more, which is nice. I wear knee pads so I can rest against the tree. I can put my arms on the bridge and the tether and go to sleep. I can do, I
that
can do
is
a bunch
like,
of different
my
things.
buddy's, how when you're in a tree stand, you lean forward on your safety harness till it like tightens up and you take a nap that way.
Yep.
Same way with like the saddle. Like you just said, like that tether that comes off the tree is that rope. You just put your arms on that and you just lean forward, and
It took me a while to trust that though. It took me a while to like get myself to sleep in it because I kept thinking I was just gonna swing around the tree. But once I did it, I felt more. Usually I'm in a tree stand. I'm just I wake up kind of like half falling out of the side of it, but yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah, I would agree. Like it's not like the most calming feeling to be sitting there in that saddle and trying to sleep, but if you're tired enough, you can do it. So then, okay, so we're looking at, I just want to recap everything here. One of the other things I wanted to cover pretty quick. I think we're over an hour. I don't know. Zoom doesn't tell me how long we've been recording. But calling, like rattling and calling. Do you grunt? Do you rattle? Do you do anything like that in the pre-rut or the rut? Have you had success or?
I'm a big grunter and bleat. So
Big grunter, huh?
Yeah,
Is that what the ladies like at the bar?
Yeah, they like when you grunt. They like when you get a little calling. So essentially, I'm using that a lot because the areas I hunt are so thick for the most part that if one's traveling by, they could travel by you at 60 yards and you're not going to see them or hear them. Especially if you're in a creek bottom, that creek running through is so loud that you can't hear a thing. And so I'll grunt relatively often. Sometimes during the rut, it'll be every 15, 20 minutes. I mean, like pretty often, just enough like that. If I would think of how long it would take a deer to cross through an area, like I want to catch him at some point. And again, that's in thick stuff. I'm not sitting on a big oak flat doing it where, that all eyes are on me, that they can catch you. So, and I'd like to put, I'll joke about it, but it's serious. Like I like to put emotion into it where like my bleat can's funny. She's one of those Primos big bleat cans, just dump it over. And so I'll like dump that twice and then I'll like make it like a chasing sequence or a seeking, just brr, brr, kind of couple grunts after that. And then if I get a buck that I see and he's kind of zombie mode type deal, I'll just get into a long growl. And that I've had a lot of success with that. Them turn around their hair on their neck coming in. I've always heard like calling on public land is not like the best thing to do, but I love that. That's why I like when I hunt elk. I like calling elk. I like that interaction. Is that the best thing to do all the time? Maybe not, but like for me, to get that show of one coming in thrashing trees and grunting coming back or whatever it might be. I don't rattle much. I haven't had much success with rattling. The times they have came in, they've came downwind. which I, for whatever reason, I haven't had that as much with grunting and bleat calls, but that's that's kind of what I've done with it.
So yeah, the best action I've ever had like with grunting has been on public. So like I'm all about like, and the other thing that's super nice about public is like it's almost like an experimental ground, like whatever.
Yeah.
Like you have no idea who was in there the day before you and what the hell they were doing. You know, there might have been coyote hunters in there last night. You have no clue, you
Yep.
know. So it's just kind of one of those things that it's like an experimentation ground. But yeah, as far as like grunting goes, the most I've ever had is on pieces of public that I've been on. It's like, what the hell was that? I always think it's another hunter when I
Yeah.
initially hear it. I'm like, ah, shit, some other hunter's coming through the woods pretending they're a deer, and it's like, holy shit, it's actually a deer.
Yeah.
You know. But so then like grunt tube wise, do you think it like what grunt tube do you use, or is there like, because I mean I have one that like extends, right, so it gets deeper or
Yeah.
quieter. Do you run it on like a middle-aged buck or an old buck, or like do you have any sort of tips for that?
Mine just has one tone to it essentially. It's an old like mad growl call or something. It's like one of the real deep, just a cylinder. It doesn't extend, doesn't have any, it's just a solid tube and it's just got a real deep tone. To me, it sounds like an
Okay.
older deer, just whether it does or not. That's the one I like. It's loud. I've used that same call forever. My backup one, because they don't make that anymore, is one by the same company. It's a mad hyper growl or something. It's got like a snortweeze tube on the top. But
Okay.
it's funny, I actually had them sitting here next to my computer because I did a video podcast with someone else who was asking about calling and they wanted me to show them, but I just put them away. But
Ah,
anyways, I just use those
that's all right.
for the grunt tube. But I'm very picky on grunt tubes. I can't use
Okay.
the smaller ones that have the tubes
Yeah.
and stuff because I don't like the tone to it
Okay.
for me personally.
I know. I've never had success calling a deer in. I've had, yeah, I've never been able to. Even when I see them like cutting across the field, and I have does next to me, like I'll call to them and they'll kind of be like, "Yeah, don't care." So
I've killed probably 5 out of my last 7 deer, I think is what I've looked at with calling.
no
But
shit.
yeah,
Oh man, that's cool.
yeah.
So in general, it's kind of like what I mean, your approach is bleats and grunts, and you don't always see them at first. You said
No, I'm mostly blind calling.
okay,
Mostly
and then just
blind
hanging
calling.
out.
Yep.
Do you ever have them come in, and they're like looking around and really like suspicious?
Yeah, yeah. I've had it. Where I got to be careful is if I'm in an area and set up and there's any little opening in front of me, uh, then they're gonna come to the edge of the thick stuff and look out. If they don't see anything, they're gonna skirt it and then try to come downwind. So if I'm set up in an area like that,
Yeah.
I actually use a decoy. I use one of those Montana decoys, the two-dimensional
No
ones that
shit.
look
You carry
real.
one of those in?
I do, yeah. So I'll use a doe and I also have a 4-point one that I'll sometimes set up one right
Okay,
behind
scary
another.
monster right there.
Yeah, the problem is if the deer get behind it and they lose it because it's two-dimensional, they kind of freak out. So again, decoys are another risky business, but the right
Yeah.
time of year they can be awesome. So,
Oh man, that's cool. That's also something I've never done.
yep, big
Um,
decoy guy. I learned that from my dad. That was something he always does, and yeah, and he's gets it done every single year. So I try to learn from him whenever I can.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I want to jump to that decoys, but I want to finish out the grunt. So essentially, it's just like a doe bleat, and then you're grunting, and then you kind of stop for 15, 20 minutes, whatever, and you do the same thing, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
Similar.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
try
For the
this
most
year. So
part. Yeah.
that's why I'm asking. I'm trying to burn
Yeah.
it into my brain.
That's mostly what I'm doing, and I've kind of laughed about it because I've heard people like complain about others that they've heard like this guy grunted all day, and almost like when Corey Jacobson, he had a note on his truck
Yeah.
that said you call too much or something like that. One of the most successful elk hunters, in the West,
Right.
and someone writes that on his truck. So like It's it is a weird thing, and I almost feel weird saying it. Like, wow, that's a lot to be calling. But and again, it all depends on the setup, and I if I'm in more of an open area, I got to be careful a little bit more, so I'm not
Yeah.
running on the tube. And but the thing with the crick bottoms, I just want to hit that one last thing with that is it is so you have to be alert or you're screwed because those deer could pop out of nowhere because you can't hear them because of the crick.
Yeah.
I've been screwed before. Luckily, most of the crick bottom spots don't have cell service, so I'm not on my phone. Um,
Yeah.
so that's always good. But if I'm sitting there with my hands in my pocket, my bow hung up or whatever, it's like, especially in a traditional tree stand, with a saddle, I got the tree to block me a little bit, but I've had it where I'm like, oh shit, like I don't know what to
There he
do
is.
because he's right there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Okay. No,
yeah,
see, yeah, I mean that's true. You just got to you got to take a couple, 2 or 3 scoops of Mountain Ops Ignite
yeah,
and be
get all
wired.
jazzed up.
uh, um, so okay, no, I really like that idea. And I mean, if you think about it and you're playing the odds on that, I'm just trying to conceptualize it in my brain because one of the tree stands that I like to hunt is about 40 yards from one of the main drags. And I can't get any closer. It's just terrain and everything just doesn't allow me to get closer than 40 yards. Um, and there's another trail that's up at like 60 to 70, and that's out of my like comfortable shooting distance. But if those deer are at that 70-yard range and 4 of them come through and I can just get one to respond to the call, like, that's 25% chance and I screw up the other 3, well, whatever. If I get that last one to come in, like, it's worth it rather than just letting them walk by.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because you're going to call at them most of the time. You're going to call at them anyway.
Yep.
Um, it's just trying to, yeah. So you like that low growl? Do you snort wheeze at them at all?
Yeah, it all depends on the temperament. Or if it's like if they're walking away, I'll just throw whatever I can at them, which this Norwegian is usually the last resort type of deal. But or if I hear one, I've heard bucks actually snort wheeze, and when that happens, I just do one back, like just. And I've had I think I've had it happen 4 different times, and 3 times it ran the other direction. But one time I've had them come in, and I didn't get a shot, but it was still an awesome experience to
Yeah.
hear that vocalization, and it was so cool.
Oh, that's sweet.
But
All right. So I mean that's something I'm gonna be messing around with this year. One of the other things as far as like rattling goes, um, I have rattled a deer in when I was like 17 years old. I watched what is it, Bucks of Tecumate, I think.
okay, yeah,
Remember that show?
yeah. Jordan
I don't
Shipley,
have the Outdoor Channel anymore, but
yeah,
yeah, and they were grunting, or they were rattling and grunting and then moving all their feet around at the same time to make it sound like they were actually like 2 deer fighting. Because if you just rattle the antlers, sometimes it's like, okay, I hear the antlers, but where's all the leaves and where's all, the other shit that should be going on if
yep,
that's really truly 2 big bucks fighting, right? So I think when I was like 16 or 17, I got on the ground and I was just rattling like crazy and making a ton of noise, and I did have a buck come in. Other than that, I've never had it happen. And it wasn't a big buck, it was a small basket rack 8 or something like that. But the other thing that I noticed, like Aaron Snyder, I mean, he's not a whitetail hunter, right? And he tells you that every single time in his story, like, I don't whitetail hunt. I go to guides and I have friends. But he puts his on a rope and then drops it down to the ground. So, and then pulls it up and down almost like a fishing lure. So it'll
okay,
rattle and hit the leaves and everything. And then I also feel like that would kind of take their eyes off a little bit off of you and where that's
yeah,
came from and more towards like the ground or wherever that echoes around. So that's another thing I'm gonna be trying this year.
yeah. That's pretty solid. I like that.
Yeah. So it's just like, yeah, I'm curious as to how I'm gonna get them down to the ground without them clinking like crazy, but
Yeah,
I'll figure that out in the tree.
Yeah, or
Um,
leave them on the ground as you climb up, and then
yeah,
have like a rope
that's
that's tied to your belt or something.
see, look at that already. Already. That's probably what I'll do. Um, yeah, no, that'd be cool because then you just kind of like pull on it almost like a doorbell or some shit, and you just pull a couple times and bam, 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 you're good to go.
Hmm.
Um, so I'll be trying that this year as well in the rut. The other thing is the decoy. Do you do you know when you set up a decoy, like if you get one of those Montanas, do you have a general idea where the deer are going to be coming from so that they see it like on its side rather than
I try to, and
okay.
that's probably my biggest difficulty with decoys, and why a lot of times I choose not to use them, because they come from so many different directions that it's hard to figure out which way to face them. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I do not have that figured out whatsoever, but I try. I try to like which way I think that they might come from, and that's the way I'll set it up with like the rear end of the deer kind of quartering to me, and then the head kind of away a little bit, because
Yeah.
usually when they're going to come around, they're going to try to come around the back of it, so that it would, let them open themselves up for a good, broadside shot or slightly quartering away
Yeah.
shot. So
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't, and I've never messed around with decoys at all. Like even though those real nice, like I think Dave Smith make nice full bodies?
I'm not even sure.
I don't know. I mean, I bought, I finally broke down after like years of not having turkey decoys. I finally broke down and bought some Dave Smith turkey decoys. Um, but yeah, I know Heartland Bowhunter uses some nice decoys, and they have some cool footage. And I always enjoy those trail cam photos of the decoys just sitting out there, and the bucks just wreck them at
But
night.
yeah,
Like that's always fun to see. I've never seen it in person. Um, but uh, but yeah, I'll have to consider those decoys. I've never done it, and maybe I'll have to give that a try. Um, those Montanas, they just fold up in a backpack and you just carry them
yeah,
out.
they fold up and then wrap a bungee cord around them, and then I just usually put them on the outside of my backpack is all.
Okay, cool. Um, what about scents? Do you ever do anything with scents?
No, not really.
No.
The only thing I do with scents is I use either forehead gland or preorbital gland on the scrapes, and then if once like people start, so we have like a camp here, so like all my family takes off first couple weeks in November, and as bucks start to come in, I try to cut the tarsal glands off those bucks. They'll
Sure.
wrap those around a rope, and I'll drag those in, and then I'll hang that right over the scrape. So that's been
Okay.
my method with it. Had a ton of luck with that. Like if I have it's a cold morning and I have a tarsal gland fresh one dragging in, I feel more confident than ever. But
Really?
yeah,
So for
that's
people who don't know where the tarsal gland is, like, explain where that is.
it's on the back leg. It's up a little bit from where the hooves are there. You'll be able to tell it's a part that stinks real bad on the back of it. It's below the knee, kind of below the calf a little bit, kind of in that portion. So
Okay. Yeah, it
yeah.
does. I
Whew.
can verify that it smells real bad.
Yeah, don't do it. Pull it out with gloves on, or your hands are gonna stink like it all day. So
Yeah. I haven't ever I've smelt it and I've had friends throw it at me. I've never used it. So I haven't ever I've never done that, but I'll have to give that a shot too.
yeah,
Um, I just think one of like I'm saying I'm going to give that a try this year. And I think it's just so fun to try all these different techniques because what back to your point, like early on, so many things are situational because some people might listen to this and be like, dude, you can't call a buck in my neck of the woods ever. And other people are probably in the same boat as you. That's like, dude, I've killed all my bucks calling them in. So
yeah,
I mean, figuring out the temper, and I think it varies by area, but then by amount of pressure, by deer density, and then also like just individual personality of each deer, like if they're more aggressive or more passive.
yep,
Yeah, I feel like there's so many things that can go into it. That's just kind of like give it a shot and see what works.
for sure.
Um, so no sense. I'm not a big scent dude either. I just don't. I've never had like. It's never seemed like it's really given me that much of an advantage. Um, I could be convinced otherwise if somebody tells me, but I just don't. I honestly don't trust the TV commercials that are like, I killed this with Tink 69. It's like, well, you also have, 700 private acres and,
Yeah.
300 acres of food plot.
And
So,
most deer piss and stuff turns to ammonia in 45 minutes anyways. Well, all does. So like I urinate in all my scrapes myself. Like that's the way I do it. And yeah, I take, I mean, and same thing. And I pee right out of the stand, saddle, whatever. Like that's always been my method, and I haven't had any issues with it. I don't know. That's just, again, my opinion. Everyone can, people can think differently, and,
right.
and there's no right or wrong with it, but that's just my stance that I've taken with it.
My cousin and I got into a heated debate over that because I'm kind of like you. I just pee right out of the tree stand. It
Yeah.
doesn't really bother me at all. And I just remember reading a study that was like deer don't give a shit about the difference between human pee and coyote piss and deer piss, and like
No.
it's all piss to them, kind of.
Yep.
So, but my cousin, he'll pack in empty bottles to fill them up in the tree stand yet, and I'm just kind of like, hey, dude, that's totally cool, but like I really don't think it matters because I've peed out of a stand and then had deer come within 20 yards of me and they seem to not give a shit. I think it's kind of like my personal opinion is like it's an old hunter's like trick or something like that. And it makes like hunting seem cool,
Yeah.
like, dude, oh yeah, I pee in a bottle because that's how, in tune these
That's how
deer
the
are.
serious guys do it.
Right? Yeah, that's how serious I am.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe in some cases, like you have super hypersensitive deer. I don't know, but yeah, I'm in the
Yeah.
same boat as you. I really don't give a shit.
Yeah. They made us do that in Alberta, and it was really weird.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, what was the name of that video? It was like Silent something.
The quiet place.
Quiet Place. Yeah,
Mhm.
sounds like a really great horror film, man. Honestly.
Yeah, I know, right?
But dude, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, if anyone listening to this, you haven't checked out The Quiet Place, that dude in Alberta he's intense.
Oh yeah, I love Jim. Like he's an absolutely great guy, but he's definitely intense. Like
Yeah.
he's just as intense as the film portrayed. That's just like the
Yeah.
way he lives his life.
Gaff tape everything.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Actually the piss bottle that was a Gatorade bottle was wrapped in hockey tape. Had
No
wrapped.
shit.
Yeah. Yep. It was pretty crazy. And I was like,
So that means it's
what if
like
I
reusable. Like they're
yeah, I was
wanting
like,
to reuse that thing.
oh, we did every day. Yeah. Gross. I know.
God, I hope it wasn't from person to person.
No, 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 no. We each had our own.
Right? Yeah. Oh man. No, that's funny. But yeah, if you guys haven't checked that out, check that out. I remember watching that. That was really cool. I
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that film. It was well made and it was just it's a different side of hunting, like somebody who's like super intense about scent, about noise, about setup, about time in the stand.
You've
I
gotta
mean,
go into that like with an open mind, and that's why like, I went into hunting it because like I saw a lot of negative comments. I saw on Sick of Gear's YouTube channel, and like saw a lot of negative comments. People were like, "Oh, this guy takes it too serious. He doesn't, make it fun." But for him, that is fun. Like it's just because that's too serious for you. Who cares? Like if you don't want to do that, don't do it. But for him, that's
right.
the way he does it, and that's the way that he thinks you need to do it there to kill big deer, and he has a history to prove it. So, you can't. Everyone's got their own style, and that's just the way Jim is. So,
Right. No, I think it'd be, I mean, personally, like, I think it'd be fun to hunt like that with him for, 5 to 7 days. And then I'd be like, all right, let me pee out of the stand or let me just come in and sit down with my clothes on. Like, I don't want to have to take them off,
yeah,
but no, that's cool. All right. We're pretty much out of time here, or we're not out of time necessarily, but I don't have any more questions for you or anything to talk about. Do you have anything that we didn't hit on for the rut?
No, I think that I guess the last thing I would just say is like try to keep your head on your shoulders. Like it's a grind. It's not a sprint. So, you know, when you're starting to feel down, my opinion is if you're hunting, say you got a week off and you know, day 5 you're feeling really terrible. I would sleep in an extra hour to make yourself feel better to ride it out. And that's just my opinion with it. Like it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So
Yeah.
enjoy it because we look forward to it every year, and try not to take yourself too seriously, which I'm telling this trying to take my own advice.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that note, Beau, tell people where they can find you.
So you can find me at my website, which is eastmeetswesthunt.com. My podcast, East Meets West Hunt, is available anywhere you can find podcasts.
It's okay.
And
It's not as good as this one, but it's all right.
it's half decent, you know, it's whatever. But and then also you can find me on Instagram at beau.martonik, beau.martonik. And then East Meets West Hunts, the other Instagram page, Facebook, YouTube, just my name, Beau Martonik. Got a whole bunch of stuff going on there. I do just want to give a quick plug. This should be coming out October 12th, you said?
Yeah.
So my caribou hunt film will be coming out October 11th. So
Oh
check that
yeah.
out on my YouTube channel. So I really would appreciate that. And
Yeah.
hey, thank you for having me on. I
Oh,
really
you
really
bet.
appreciate it.
Do you have a podcast on the caribou hunt?
Yeah, I got 3 podcasts, video ones actually on YouTube. So
Okay, cool.
from
Yeah,
up in
check those out
Alaska.
before you check out the video or whatever, so you have some context.
Yeah. Yep.
I like to do that. I like to listen to the podcast and then watch the video. So, all right,
Awesome.
awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it, and best of luck this season.
Yeah, you too, man. Looking forward to seeing how it goes.
Yeah.